There's very less coding you are going to see. Very simple syntaxes, just like normal English statements. Multi-programming features, wide varieties of applications. I was saying like automation applications, web applications, animations, and desktop applications, embedded applications. So mostly used in game development. So wide varieties of applications. Many built-in libraries. We have no need to write huge codings. We have got many interactive mode, and it's a cross-platform language. It can run on any platform like Windows, Linux, Mac OS. User-friendly programming. It's a high-level language. So Python Software Foundation. It's a non-profit organization devoted towards Python. It was launched in 2001. Objective to foster the development of Python. President is Guido van Rossum. Is the personality who developed Python. Headquarters Delaware, United States. Official website python.org. You see the Python versions. Python 1 version released in the year 1989, and later 2 version in the year 2000. Current version that what we are using is 3. That is 2008. It was released. Latest version is 3.9. That what we are using. Stable version is 3.7. That is mostly used version, and previous stable version is 2.7. Just it takes 2 to 5 minutes to install Python. Go to Python and say Python download. It will automatically redirect to python.org website. Say downloads folder, download this Python and say next. Okay. You can just follow the video steps. And the Python execution mode, mode and batch mode. Interactive mode means here we directly type Python statements. Yes, we interact with it statement by statement. Interactive mode means one second. Ideally, any valid Python statements you can type and interact. So whenever you say ideally, so whenever we install Python, observe this. Whenever we install Python here, go to where your Python is available in the start programs. Okay. The first thing what we see ideally, right? Integrated development environment. It opens in interactive mode. This is what you can type any valid Python statements and interact with it, like x equal to x equal to, try to say again, x, if you are given space, you are not supposed to use space here as we wish in Python. In Python, spaces you not view as we wish. So uncheck y equal to Kumar. Any valid Python statements you can type. Say what is that x plus y value, adding Ajay. Any valid statements you can type. And if you want to work with batch mode, file, new file, here you can type your Python statements and save it as .py extension and run here. Say run module, run module. Okay. Fine. I was just discussing like Python data types. And I was about to, I'll come back to the data types, but before that, you need to just say defining variables in Python. Defining variables in Python. If I define some variables in Python, what internally happens, you need to understand. What is going to happen internally, you need to understand. I'm going to discuss 4 cases here. I'm going to discuss like, okay, and if I compare C, C++, Java with Python, Python supports dynamic data types. What is that? Dynamic data types. Here in C, C++, they are static type. For example, if you want to define a variable like x as 10, compulsory the data type int should be defined, right? Otherwise, this x is not going to get created. Y as 7.4. Float value, I need to say float here. Z equal to Pune. String, I need to say string, right? Without this data type defining, this x, y, and z can't be created, right? But in Python, if you say x, no need to say the data type, no need to define the data types. Directly I can say x as 10. But in other language, what kind of variable x is means what you say? Integer variable. How? Based on the data type different. But here, what kind of variable x is means what value you have assigned to it? 10, right? Integer value. So integer variable going to get created dynamically. Python, based upon the value, compulsorily you need to assign a value. Directly you cannot say x. In other programming language, you will say int x, second line you will say x. But directly, compulsorily, whenever you're defining a variable in Python, you need to give some value, because what type of variable to be created depending upon what value you are assigning. Okay, x equal to 10 means what you are trying to assign to x, what you are trying to assign to x, integer variable, right? Y equal to 4.5, what you are trying to assign to y. Z equal to, right? What you are trying to assign this one. So here we have got a function called type function. Type of x is what? Integer. Why it is integer? You have assigned a integer. Here type of y is what type? Float type. Why it is float? You have assigned a float value. That's what dynamically it is going to from the given value. Type of z. It's nothing but string. Here you are defining x equal to, next line can I say x equal to 4.5? Is it valid in other programming language? You have defined x as 10, but you can modify to 20 or 30, but you cannot modify to a float value, right? Because x should be integer type. It's invalid here. But in Python, x equal to 10, I can say x equal to 3.4. It's valid. In the first line, it was integer. In second line, it is float. Type will be changing depending upon what value you are assigning. Okay. So this thing we need to understand, but I'm going to discuss 4 cases to make you understand much better defining variables. Fine. Okay. Observe this. Defining variables in Python. You can parallelly make a note of this, everyone. Defining variables in Python. Case 1. If I'm saying like x equal to 10, Observe here, whenever you say x equal to 10, what happens internally? Internally, one object is going to get created with value 10. Internally, an object gets created with value 10. It's going to occupy some address. It's going to occupy some address. If you are storing something, it is going to occupy some memory, right? So it's going to have some address. The address is written to x. Whenever I say x equal to 10, what x is storing? X is, say here, x stores the address. Don't say like x is storing 10. Whenever you say x equal to 10 means x stores the address. But don't say, okay. Here, three things what you need to understand is print x. Whenever I say print x means prints the content at that address. Prints the content at that address. So it stores the address, right? Whenever you say print x, it goes to that address of that memory location and prints that value at that address. Prints the content at that address. Now try to answer what is that content at that address? 10. Print, if I want to print the address, now you see print x means it prints the content that is 10. If I want to print the address, id of x, we have got id of x, prints the address of x, prints the address of x. 103070. Type of x, print type of x is what type? Okay, prints the data type of x. Data type of x. What is the data type of x? It is integer. Why it is integer means you have assigned an integer value. Excuse me. Print x prints the content. ID of x prints the address. Type of x prints the data type of x. This is fine. Okay. Internally, object gets in Python. Everything is an object. Whenever you define something, an object gets created. Observe this case 2 next. Case 2. Now I want the sessions to be interactive. So everyone try to respond. Whether your answers are correct or wrong, try to give response. X is 10, Y is 20. Now try to say how many objects will be created. 2 objects. What is it? 2 objects. 1 object for 10, 1 object for 20. Means for 10, 1 address. This address is given to stored by X. 1040. This address is stored by Y. 2 different variables with 2 different values. Then 2 different objects gets created with 2 different addresses. Print x. Let's say print x. What is the x value? Yes, first goes to that address and prints the value at that address. 10. Simply print content of x. That is what? 10. Address of x. ID function. What is it? 103090. Type of x, to print the data type of x. Int type. See here, previously dynamic data types I am saying, right? If I, for example, x equal to squared bracket 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. What I am trying to assign to x? What I am trying to assign to x? List of values. So what is the type of x? It is a list type. What type? List type. I am trying to assign list of values. Later we'll be discussing this collection data types, list, tuples, sets, dictionaries, right? 10, 20, based upon what you are assigning. One value if you are assigning fundamental data types, one float or one integer, one string. Multiple values, collection data types like list. For example, y equal to you are assigning a tuple of values 2, 3, 4, 5. See the braces in Python. Simple syntax is only the bracket is changing. So here type of y will be tuple type. Type of y will be tuple type. What is tuple? We'll be discussing list and tuples. We have got a lot of discussion on lists. List properties, list indexing, list slicing, list functions, list methods, nested list, modifying a list. So nearly for 3-4 days we'll be discussing on lists, right? And Z curly braces. See, if you see the braces itself, you need to identify what are they. Set type. What is it? Set type. Type of Z is set type. Okay. Fine. Now coming back to our discussion. Case 2. Two different variables xy, two different values 10, 20, two different objects, two different addresses. If I say print y means 20. Print ID of y 104080. Type of y integer type, right? Yes. Okay. Okay. Observe this case 3 once. Case 3 observe. Whenever you're defining variables, x 10. How many objects are created here? How many objects? Only one object. There are only one object. Before, okay, x equal to 10, one address 103070. This address is given to x, right? Fine. Before creating object for y, first it checks any object with value 10 is available in the memory or not. If available, the same address will be given to y. If not available, a new object gets created. X is 10, y is 10, z is 10. Don't think like the 3 objects with value 10 gets created. Only one object with value 10, the same address will be given to x, y, z. There won't be any duplicate of this 10, 10, 10. 10 for example, xy, x1, x2, x3, all have got 10. 10 objects won't be created. Only one object address will be given to x, y, and z. Means x, y, and z, they are sharing the same content in the address. Now try to say print x is what? 10. Print y? 10. Print z? 10. All are printing the same. Whenever I say print z, it goes to that address and prints that value. What is that? 10. Print y also, it goes to the same address and print that value 10. Print x also. I'll show you all these things practically today. These 4 cases. ID of x. ID of x. 103070. Print ID of y. 103070. And for z also the same thing. Type will be integer type. All are integer types. This is case 3. Now case 4. Case 4. X value is 10. Here x is 20. Not x and y. X is 10, x is 20. How many objects? For 10, one object gets created with some address. And for x equal to 20, one object gets created 20 with some address. Print x, what it prints? 10 or 20? Print x means what it prints? 20, right? Latest value prints. The salary last year, 50,000. Your salary this year, 70,000. Print salary means what it prints? 70, latest salary. Here also, latest value of x, 20. Print x means it prints 20. Print address of x means latest value address. Okay. Now, what happens to the previous object 10? Can I retrieve the value from the previous object? Can I print that 10 or not? Huh? What are 20? Okay, so 10 times if I say print x, print x, print x, it will be 20 only, right? It is going to print 20. If I want to print this value from the previous, that is the previous object 10, can I retrieve the value? I'm asking. Can I print the value 10 or not? To know what happened to this object 10, to know what happens to the previous object 10, there is a small concept I need to discuss: garbage collector. So, garbage collector, it's I'll go back to the case 3 and I'll explain that garbage collector. It's too early to discuss about this concept garbage collector. I'll just give overview of what it is. Later in our topics, we'll be discussing in brief with multiple examples. But what happens to the previous object means garbage collector. What is the work of garbage collector means? Removes. It removes unused. What is it? Unused or unreferenced objects. It removes unused or unreferenced objects from the memory. From the what? Removes unused or unreferenced objects from the memory. And you may ask, what do you mean by unused or unreferenced objects? How will you know the objects are unused or unreferenced? So garbage collector means removes unused or unreferenced objects from the memory. What do you mean? Okay, objects. What do you mean by unused or unreferenced means? Objects whose reference count becomes 0. Objects whose reference count becomes 0. Objects whose reference count becomes 0, then those objects whose reference count becomes 0, then those objects we call them as unused or unreferenced objects. Whose reference count becomes 0, then these objects are immediately removed from the memory. Immediately removed from the memory. Objects whose reference count becomes 0, then these objects are immediately removed from the memory by garbage collector. These objects are immediately removed by the garbage collector. You may ask, what do you mean by reference count becoming 0? How can an object reference count become 0? When an object reference count becomes 0, what is that reference count becoming 0? What do you mean by reference count first? What do you mean by reference count? Nothing but number of variables. What is that? Number of variables pointing to an object. Number of variables pointing to an object. Or number of variables storing address of an object. Number of variables pointing to an object or number of variables storing address of a object. Number of variables pointing to an object or number of variables storing address of a object will give the reference count. How many variables are pointing to an object or how many variables storing the address of the object? I'll just show you this. What is reference count? Example. Now say number of variables pointing to an object, number of variables stored. So here I want this object. Object 10 is there. What is the reference count of this object? Reference count of this object is what? How much? How many variables are pointing to it? 3 variables. X is pointing, Y is pointing, Z also pointing to this side. So reference count will be 3. How many variables pointing to this object and how many variables storing the address of this object? X is storing this address, Y also storing this address, Z also storing this address, right? 3 variables storing, that's why reference count is 3. What if I modify the Y value from 10 to 20? I'm modifying the Y value to 20. If I'm modifying Y value to 20 means one object gets created, one object with value 20 with some address, right? That is given to Y. Now y is pointing to the new object 20. Y is not pointing to this object 10, right? It is not pointing to object 10. It is pointing to object new object 20. So reference node decreases to 2. Only x and z are pointing. So y is pointing to different object. Slowly I'm modifying the z value also to 30, right? So here an object to 30 is going to get created with some address. The address is given to z. Now z is pointing to a new object. Z is not pointing to this old object, right? Z is not pointing to this old object, right? So reference count becomes what? Reference count becomes 1. Only x is pointing now. Previously x, y, z were pointing. Now slowly I modify the x value to 50. Why I'm saying all this? Because how an object reference count becomes a 0 when an object is going to get removed. X equal to 50 means one more object gets created. This object address is stored by x. Now x is pointing to the new object, x is not pointing to this old object. Reference count becomes 0. None of the variables are pointing to this object 10. Object 10 is what? Unused or unreferenced objects. None of the variables are pointing to it. None of the variables storing the address of it. So we call that as unused or unreferenced object. Understood now? So immediately this object is going to get removed by the garbage collector. Okay. So this thing again I'll be explaining. I'll be just discussing these things in brief in garbage collector concept. 1 second, but just to know what happens means it gets removed by the garbage collector. Whenever x value is 5, next line immediately I'm saying x value 10. What happens to the previous one? Gets removed by the garbage collector. Just keep that in mind. Now go back to the case 4. Now forget about x equal to 20. Say about x equal to 10. What is the reference count of this object? How many variables are pointing? Only x is pointing, right? Reference count is what? 1. Forget about that x equal to 20. Only one variable x is pointing to this object, so reference count 1. Slowly I modify that x equal to 20. A new object created. Now this x is pointing to the new object. X is not pointing to this. No. What will be the reference count becomes? 0, right? Whenever it becomes 0, this object is going to get removed. So what is your x equal to 10, x equal to 20 means the previous object is going to get removed. Understood all these 4 cases. Any queries in this, anyone? No. Whenever we install Python, go to this Python installed one. Ideally Python 3. File, new file you say. Now I'm going to discuss 3 cases. Case 1, now see comment in Python starts with hash. Comment. If you're writing anything starting with hash means it is comment, not executable. Case 1, defining a variable. What is the defining a variable? X as 10, print x, type of x, address of x. Save it. So I create a separate folder for this batch, Python 11:30 a.m. run module. Print explains, it prints the content, that is what 10. Type of X is what type? Integer type. The address where exactly it is stored. Understood. This is what case 1, what we have discussed. Case 2 is the same thing. I will copy. File, new file. Sorry. Case 2. Defining two different variables. Define two different variables with two different values. Two different variables with two different values. Then two different objects gets created. Two different objects gets created with with the two different variables with two different values. Then two different objects gets created with two different addresses. Right? For example, x value is 10, y value is 20. Print x, type of x, id of x. Print y, type of y and id of y. Print y, type of y and id of y. Type of x, id of y, type of y, address of y, and print y. Right? Now, sir, run the run model. Can you please answer the address of x and address of y? Will it be different? Address of x and y should be different, right? Because two different values, two different addresses, two different objects, right? So now run module. 10 is what? Integer type. This is the address. 20 is what? Integer type. This is the address, right? Now I'll copy this entire code and just go for the case 3. Copy it. And if you want to write one more, file, new file. Case 3. Defining two different variables with same values. Then only one object gets created. Only one object gets created. With same value, you can say. Only one object is created and its address. two different variables with same value, then only one object gets created and its address is returned to both the variables. X value is 10, Y value also 10. Now try to answer. Print X, type of X, address of X. Address of X and address of Y now, same or different? It should be same, right? Because same content, only one object, only one address. Case 4 you observe now. Case 4. Case 4 can you say defining two variables with the same name. Two variables with same name but with different values. But with different values. Then only what is it case 4? Two different variables with same name but with different values. X is 10 and X is 20. Two different variables with same name but with different values. Then different objects gets created. Two different objects gets created. The previous one gets removed and the X is 10 and X is 20. Print X, type of X and ID of X. Now, print X means it prints 20. Type of X, int. Address of X, where exactly it is stored. 20 and type is integer, and this is the address, right? These 4 cases you understood, right, everyone? All these 4 cases you understood. Any queries in these 4 cases? If I go back to this case 3, X is 10, Y is 10. The address of X and Y same or different? Same, right? But now you say 10.0 if I say 10 and 10.0. First you say me type of Y is what type? Float. Type of X? Integer. Means one integer object, one float object. Will they have same address or different address? Different address, right? Yes. Run. How about this video to you? Fine. And just to go through this. I'll keep in the group. Okay. Understood this? How exactly what happens internally whenever you're defining a variable? How to print the content, how to print the address, how to print their type, right? Next is coming to this data types in Python. Now, data types. We have what? Fundamental data types and collection data types. Collection data types like list, tuple, sets, dictionaries. Fundamental like integer, float, string, boolean, complex. Okay. What is fundamental? What is collection? What are the different types of fundamental? What are the different of collection types? And I'll discuss more. I'll give more examples. So everything from here on, you will be seeing everything practical oriented. Nothing. There won't be anything theoretical. Okay. So I hope everyone have installed your that is Python on your systems. So just install your Python and try to just give a regular practice at least for 1 hour daily. And try to experiment it by changing the values. So I said you can install Python on a Windows, Linux, Mac OS. Even if you have got a smartphone, you can install Python within the smartphone, right? Go to this Play Store, Python IDE, you say, Python IDE. Many IDs you will see. So download any one IDE. You can just type your statements there. You can execute your statements there. Work with IDEs. I'll show you how to work with IDEs in Python. Integrated development environments you use in the real time, like PyCharm, Spider, Jupyter. Okay, Anaconda, Prompt, Navigator. Okay. These things I'll show you how to download and how to install them separately. Okay, so tomorrow my discussion will be on data types, fundamental and collection types. And if possible from the next week, I'll send some extra time, like I'll just extend the timing. Okay. Any queries from your side, anyone? So I want more interaction from your side. I want sessions to be active. It should be like a debate from the both the sides, right? Right? Okay. I'll stop here and I'll forward this video of this session. Keep in the group. We can just go through it.